Big news and big potential news. Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football for the next 60 with you. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports right next to me. Got to join him right there. Of course, we got Tony Gerdeman right below me. Buckeye Huddle. Buckeye Weekly is the podcast. We will give you further details on all of these platforms because they are the destinations you need to hit each and every day, folks, as you prepare for the Buckeye season. College football playbook, of course, right here on YouTube with Kevin and with Tony. Kevin Noon with Buckeye Huddle as well. The Big Me Podcast, College Football Playbook. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing good. And kickoff in 10 days. All right. Before that, 2024's in sight, of course, with an amazing recruiting class as it stands right now that got even more incredible with a top 25 to 30 player in the nation. Kevin, one Eddrick Houston out of Georgia. That stands out.
Yeah, I don't want to hear any more with people saying that Ohio State can't beat out Alabama and UGA for kids because Ohio State beat out Alabama and UGA for a player out of the state of Georgia. Eddrick Houston, 6'4", 275 range, Buford High School, super talented defensive end, somebody who I expect to play on the outside. No, he's not Booker Pickett in terms of your really slight, quick rush end, but this guy is not going to be somebody who slides inside, in my opinion. Really, with him being ranked anywhere from 17th to about 55th in the nation, depending on which service you follow, I think that he could be underrated just even with all of that. I think that he is a super talented defensive end, really a position of need for Ohio State, especially the way that Ohio State's defensive end recruiting kind of petered out last year. One of these commits that with the start of the season, I think people may not talk about as much as they should, but this is as important of a commit in this class as I can think of. I mean, obviously you have Jeremiah Smith, who's number 2 in the nation in multiple services, but are we really looking at receivers being a position of need? Probably not as much as we are at defensive end, and Eddrick Houston fits that bill.
Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, just a tremendous get. Obviously, national top 25 or top 30 player. And, the rap on Ohio State under Ryan Day and Larry Johnson has been that they haven't gotten these kind of blue chip players on the defensive side of the football, and the defensive recruiting hasn't been very good. But, they continue to debunk that myth here with Eddrick Houston. I thought what was interesting, somebody, I think on Twitter or on our message board, posted that Georgia transferred in one of their top recruits to Buford, Georgia, to help them recruit the guys at Buford, Georgia, and they're going to like Florida State, Ohio State, and somewhere else. So, yeah, that strategy hasn't worked real well for the Curbster, and Ohio State continues to clean up in the state of Georgia. Got Air Noland, obviously. I want to say, did Langston Hughes just play Buford over the weekend? Is that what the matchup was?
It was Carrollton.
I'm sorry. Okay, Carrollton. At any rate, and I'm sure we can delve into that if Air Noland did anything of note. But, last weekend was the first weekend of high school football, and there were some good Ohio State highlights out there. I know you guys went to some games where some of those guys were. But back on Eddrick Houston, this is a guy that comes at a position of great need, I think, for Ohio State. When you talk about JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are leaving after this season, if all things are equal. You've got Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, obviously, kind of waiting in the wings, ready to roll. Mitchell Melton as well. But Eddrick Houston is a guy that's going to help energize that position for the next several seasons, it would seem. And obviously, again, you can't have enough big, strong, fast guys who can run and put pressure on the quarterback, and that's what it seems like is the case here with Eddrick Houston.
Yeah, don't look now, but like Ohio State, 3 of their top 5 commits are defensive guys, and 5 of their top 10 are on the defensive side of the ball. So Crazy times indeed for the Ohio State Buckeye recruiting. I think the one other thing that to help out with the depth with the defensive end next year, you've got Arvell Reese moving from linebacker to defensive end this year, so that should help some as well. But yeah, a good get, and if nothing else, it just calms down the natives for a little while until the next guy comes in and takes an NIL deal somewhere else. But this is a guy they had to have, so this is a big one, big hit for Larry Johnson and for everybody else on the Ohio State staff, really.
Talking Buckeyes with all of you. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Consider supporting us here at the Voice of College Football with all we do with Ohio State football, especially with these three each and every week. It's always a good time, and it's always a ton of insight for Buckeyes fans. We appreciate everybody that showed up last week. We had I didn't realize this until just a few minutes ago. We had a record-breaking show. There's 12,000 views on last week's get-together. May have something to do with, I don't know. I would have to brainstorm for hours to figure out why that particular show. So if we're done with recruiting, at least for now, unless there are comments and questions in the chat that we will get to the topic at hand. Tony, let's stay with you. Devin Brown, Kyle McCord, anything that's happened over the last week, whether real or imagined, or in regards to your thoughts about what could result?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's real or imagined. That's a good point. But talking to Ryan Day on Monday when he said the coaching staff was pretty much split. My thinking is that split is because I even asked him, is it a defensive versus offensive split? And he almost started to answer before then he said, no comment. But to me, I'm assuming that, and have been hinted towards as such, that defensive coaches are leaning towards Devin Brown, offensive coaches leaning towards Kyle McCord. Defensive coaches, my thinking is that they don't like dealing with guys who will get out of the pocket and will make plays with their feet and just scramble, whereas the guys in the pocket, like a Kyle McCord, they know where he's going to be. They know where he's going to stay. The thing is, Kyle McCord will still get out of the pocket. He will still keep plays alive. So I think it's interesting that you've got two guys that everybody likes. I think my thinking is the defensive side, defensive coaches just don't like dealing with that extra aspect that Devin Brown gives them. So that's maybe why, in my theory, is that they're siding with Devin Brown just because of that aspect of it. But I think both guys, I think Brian Hartline said it yesterday, Ohio State has two starting quarterbacks. They just don't know which one is going to be out there first, basically.
Steve.
Yeah, I don't consider this to be a negative thing. I think there are some positives here, that they do have the two fields running 11 on 11. We've harped on that quite a bit. And I think that's allowed those guys to get 70% of the reps on their respective fields. And they're getting more reps than they would normally get in a normal camp, because instead of everybody standing around and watching 22 guys play football, you've got 44 guys playing football at all times. So they've gotten the requisite number of reps and they've gotten the work. And there's enough data, probably 200 or 300 throws over or more, even over a almost 3-week period. They would have started practice 3 weeks ago tomorrow. So this is finishing the third full week. They've had a couple off days. So 18 practices, figure 30, 40 throws of practice, 30 throws, 500 throws, probably 400, 500 throws for each guy. I mean, that's crazy amount of data and workload that they've put on those two guys. And they know what the stats are. They know what the numbers are. And if you can't make a decision based on 400, 500, 600 throws, then I don't know what you're looking for. You have a whole season's worth of data or 2 seasons worth of data from practice to really hone in on and figure out who should be the starting quarterback. And I think they're going to get to the bottom of this No problem. I think the one trade-off, the one negative, is that whoever the starter is has not done all of those reps with Marvin Harrison and Emeka Buka and Kate Stover and Xavier Johnson and Fleming and Tate and whoever else is in that top 5, 6, 7 receivers, maybe Ennis, maybe one of the Rogers guys.
Stop right there. This week at the Denny Super Slam, starting at $7.99.
That could be me. Hang on.
It is. I double checked. Denny's, we need a sponsorship.
Just
Immediately.
Just
You get
mute
3
me. I'm going to
seconds.
go close whatever that is.
Everybody hold off on the Super Slam purchase. You can hang with us for another 45 minutes before you have to go get that.
You know, with the quarterback situation and the reps, it would be nice to have a guy be able to just spend all of his time with the first team offensive line. Because as Steve was saying, like they're split up. And so when we saw them, it was like Kyle McCord getting the second team offensive line, which had 2 walk-ons on it. And, you know, he had a couple of starting receivers with him, but you know, how much of a look can you get? And Ryan Day said, don't worry about it. They're getting plenty of looks with the first team offensive line, the first team receivers. They're getting enough. I do think if Ohio State wasn't opening on the road in the Big Ten this season, even if it is just Indiana, like if they're opening with Youngstown State, there would be absolutely no doubt that they're going to play both quarterbacks, and they would be talking about it openly. Now it's like a worst case scenario, and it's almost, yeah, we're probably going to have to do that, you know, or we may be doing that. If it was Youngstown State, Ryan Day would probably go and say, yeah, well, both guys are going to play, so you know, it's not that big of an issue.
Any
I think
thoughts
I
on
got my
QB at this?
audio. I think I got my audio situation squared away for a minute until it pops back up. I'm just going to say the only trade-off is they're not getting the timing down with the starters, but yeah, it's weird that the other 10 spots on offense seem to be etched in stone. The only one in doubt is the quarterback position. Over on defense, it looks like 9 or 10 of the spots are etched in stone, and the one in question is the other safety position that they listed 3 guys were competing for the last safety spot. What is it? Jahad Carter, Josh Proctor, and somebody else were competing for the other safety spot. So pretty much everything else is etched in stone across the board except for quarterback and that.
Yeah, just wake me once everybody comes out and gets that first designation as starter, and then we'll kind of go from there. I mean, we love talking about depth charts and we love talking about starters, but you know, I want to see the snap counts at the end of the game, and then then I really get to kind of make my decisions from there. At this point, is there really any juice to sit there and name a starter at quarterback? They've already gone through taking the hits of, oh, if you got 2, you got none, and everything else. You may as well just roll somebody out there for the first play in Bloomington and see, you know, see where it stands. But there's certainly no question bigger around Buckeye Nation right now than what's going on, and people are suddenly not having faith in a head coach that has had some of the most prolific starting quarterbacks in the history of the program. And I understand that the game has evolved and is different, but I went back and watched a game from 91, I think, on Big Ten Network on like BTN and 60.
Who was that?
It was like
Which
they were
game?
playing a completely different sport.
Do you remember what game that was?
I think it was an Iowa game.
Oh, 16-9. Is that the final that year, Tony?
I think that may have been it. I mean,
16-9?
it was difficult to watch. It was difficult to watch. I mean,
Jeff
I was an
Graham?
undergrad at that point, so I may have been watching the game or at the game, but I probably was quite impaired at the time.
That was an NFL quarterback. Quite impaired. That was an NFL quarterback playing for the Buckeyes that day.
Tom Tupa?
I think it would have been Jeff Graham.
But what
Quarterback?
year?
Kent Graham.
It was 91, I think.
Kent Graham.
David Greenshield called the show last night. He is just so concerned about 1996, 2015 being replayed, just switching guys back and forth, not coming to a decision, and that being to the detriment.
Well,
I don't.
my thought on that is 20. Well, let's start with 96. 96, you had two quarterbacks that were completely different. I mean, you had Joe Germain, who was your pocket passer, who could have 6 miles in front of him and still wasn't going to look to run. And then you had Stanley Jackson, who was much more the dual threat. So that was one thing where you did not necessarily have the same playbook for both of these guys. 2015 was different because you had Cardale coming in off of his 3-game run, and we got more JT Barrett put in there because Cardale just was not nearly as effective as he was during that 3-game stretch. And so that was kind of more of a, we're making adjustments because we need to make adjustments. If you take everything at face value, this is a case of both McCord and Brown are both playing so well that it's just hard to distinguish between the two guys to make a decision. I mean, it sounds like you're getting a play out of both of them as opposed to trying to cover up somebody's C play with somebody else. So I don't necessarily see it as the same situation as either if you really kind of do a deep dive on it. But I can understand what David Greenshield is saying from a top-down look.
And especially since they were struggling through the same situation for another full season after that, 1997.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan Day said he didn't think he'd go past 6 games. Like he didn't foresee it going that far when somebody asked him. So I definitely don't see it going past 24, 30 games. So he said these things will always sort themselves out. And he said he knew in his heart of hearts that a quarterback will emerge. It's kind of like we'll get down to 85. Don't worry about it. It'll happen. And I think this is that same sort of thing. It's going to happen.
Well, what emboldened me was when he spoke on Monday, he kind of quoted chapter and verse why both guys have done well. And he talked about how they ran the 2-minute drill and they both put the ball in the end zone. And so it's not a case of we don't really have one or the other. It's more a case of we've got 2 pretty good players and we want to make sure we get this right. I think that Ryan Day was very truthful in what he said. And I say that just because if he is sandbagging his comments on this and one guy's clearly ahead of the other, then the players know that. And if the coach is coming out and saying one thing and they're seeing something else in practice, he kind of loses his credibility. So that's one thing. 2, he said the staff was basically split down the middle, as Tony alluded to earlier. And if that's not the case, then he loses credibility with the staff. I mean, unless it was a secret vote where he grabbed him in the hallway and said, "What do you think?" and then marked it down, 1 for Brown, 1 for McCord. It wasn't necessarily like that. My guess was go around the room or show of hands or whatever. So, whatever. I believe that it is that Brown has had a great camp. Otherwise, McCord would already be named because I expected it to be McCord just on seniority. And, I think McCord's a good player. I don't think it's a case where you're, accepting less by giving it to the older guy. I think he's a very good player in his own right. So I think what's going to happen is in the first 3 games, it'll be readily apparent to everybody who it ought to be. And, one of them is going to get in there and play really well. The other one is going to get in there and play pretty well. And I think you'll probably know who it should be.
Well, let's also go in the direction that Steve was going, alluding to the positive side of this, Buckeye Nation, for once. The positive side is one of these 2 quarterbacks, the loser of the job, split the reps for almost all of August and got, 30% the final week, and who knows what the percentage is going to be going forward, but should be more game ready than their chief rivals in the division. So they should be better at the number 2 spot if needed than Penn State or Michigan, I would think.
you better hope. Not, it may not ever come into play, but gosh, who are even the backups at Penn State and Michigan right now? Because you certainly don't hear about anything there. Obviously, having their established quarterbacks, if we can call Drew Aller an established quarterback, but how often have we seen where you need that backup guy? I mean, we've seen it at Michigan and Penn State. Not in the not too recent past, not too distant past.
All right, folks. Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football with Steve, with Kevin, with Tony. Got to get on over to their platforms because they're all over it every day. Steve with Bucknuts. You got Kevin, Buckeye Huddle. Tony with Buckeye Huddle as well. The podcasts are the Big Me Podcast with Kevin, and you got Tony's Buckeye Weekly. All right. That connects directly, of course, to the offensive line. And the continued mixing and matching, and how close are we there? Steve, we can start with you.
Talk about the offensive line or the defensive line? I didn't
The
catch
offensive
that.
line.
The offensive line, I think it's pretty well set. I think they're going to go Josh Simmons at left tackle, Donovan Jackson left guard, Carson Hinsman, it sounds like, has the edge over Victor Cutler at center. Then Matthew Jones, the incumbent at right guard, and Josh Fryer at right tackle. Although Coach then said that the freshman Luke Montgomery is going to play some snaps, whether he cuts into Josh Fryer at right tackle remains to be seen. Tegratosh Bola will probably also get to play some at tackle, depending which side. Zen Mahalski may get to play as well. And then Enoch Vamahi sounds like the next guard off the board. So to me, there's your top 7, 8, 9 that have kind of identified themselves. And what appeared to be a position that was in flux is perhaps not quite as bad as it was cracked up to be coming into the start of preseason camp. It is pretty telling that your top 3 tackles are a guy that started one season at San Diego State, a journeyman somewhat in Josh Fryer, although that's probably not even the right word. Just a guy who's bided his time, third-year player, Josh Fryer, and not your prototypical left tackle, I wouldn't think, Josh Fryer, depending on what we've seen, the blue chippers that have come through there. And then a true freshman, Luke Montgomery, and then a redshirt freshman, Tegratosh Bola. Jobs come open for a reason, don't they, guys? And that's kind of typified with why that change was made to Justin Fry a year ago.
Yeah, it's just kind of how it works out. Sorry, I had to take mine off of mute. I've got a crazy dog running around here at various points. But yeah, I felt going into the offseason and everything else that we should probably be talking more about the offensive line than the quarterback situation, only to have this delay in a starting quarterback being named. But it does seem like things have kind of sorted themselves out. I'll be interested to see if Carson Hinsman is able to hold off Vic Cutler even as the year kind of goes on, as you generally don't bring in a transfer portal person just to sit them per se. So I think by all accounts, Carson Hinsman has had a tremendous offseason and has really gone out and kind of won the job. It's not a default thing, but I think as Vic Cutler feels more comfortable within the Ohio State system and everything else, I mean, let's not forget it's a very different world between ULM and OSU. So there was a certain amount of acclamation for Cutler. So that one could continue on. I think the biggest thing is just having continuity, because offensive line is certainly a situation of where you want all 5 guys to act as one. You want them to act as a unit. So moving guys in and out constantly does not equal what you want there. So once you kind of get to that point, you want to run with it. Josh, no Jimmy, no Josh Simmons, certainly out at the one tackle position. We're being told the right things. We're certainly being told that he has been a very pleasant surprise and has been, very, very competitive and very strong at his position. I think we've always felt that Josh Fryer was somebody that was going to step well into his role. I think that, as Steve had mentioned, the Luke Montgomery news about they're going to have to find a way to get him some playing time and everything else bodes really well for that. Is that going to be with the 41 jersey as the extra offensive lineman, as the tight end, as the eligible tight end with that type of number? I mean, I'll be interested to see what kind of comes out of that. But I think Ohio State's going to have 3 weeks to kind of figure everything out before Notre Dame sits there and awaits them in week 4.
Yeah, everything that we've heard from the coaches and the offensive line themselves, everything is super positive, and everybody, the confidence, the change in confidence from talking to Ryan Day after the spring to talking to him in fall camp is night and day in terms of how he feels about things. But I still think it's important to remember that Ohio State went and now is starting the former San Diego State right tackle, who never played left tackle, as their left tackle. So, like, if you just say those words and put them in a sentence, you're like, boy, this is a bad situation. This is not a good situation to be in. And so I think that's a real thing. Now, they've been really impressed by everything he's doing, so that's good. He's very athletic, and so that's great. And I think perhaps the positive spin on this is you bring in somebody from San Diego State, you bring in somebody from Louisiana Monroe, you bring them to Ohio State, and the world is opened up to them in terms of reaching their potential. When we talked to Vic Cutler last week or the week before, he said he didn't even realize all of the things that are available to him at Ohio State until after spring ball, basically. Like, if you just need another smoothie or a protein shake, somebody will get it for you. Anything that you need, you don't even have to really get out of your chair. You just look over and say, hey, I need this, and they'll go get it for you. Just stuff like that. All of the different things that are available to you. Josh Simmons is understanding and realizing a lot of that as well. Ryan Day told a story where after practice, he walked by Josh Simmons and he said, Josh, this is just like San Diego State. And they both kind of nodded, and Day walks off, and Josh says, Coach, this is nothing like San Diego State. So he's been thrown in this. He's responded well. And if he continues to respond, then Ohio State's got something. I just think, there's still the concern coming into the season was offensive line, and you're still playing. If we want to look at the concern again, you're playing at left tackle, a guy who's never played there, was at San Diego State last year. Your center is a redshirt freshman who has he may have played in a game or two, but never played a meaningful snap at Ohio State. The backup and the guy challenging him was a left tackle at Louisiana Monroe this year and has played about 5 games as center in his past, has started about 4 or 5 games as center in his past. And then at right tackle, Josh Fryer, who everybody loves, but is being pushed by a true freshman. So everything sounds good, but if you look at each of these individual 3 things in a vacuum, there's some concern there. But this is college football, and the job of the coaches is to bring all of this together on an annual basis. No matter what kind of hand you are dealt, you've got to put something out there.
So even though they're most likely set with the starting 5 and comfortable with that 5, I've never seen any studies on this. Here's another stat for you, Tony. Would love to come up with the average number of starting, let's say, out of not just starters, but starting games lost in a typical offensive line year in college football. What is that number? It's probably got to be 1 to 2 guys missing, 4 to, then you got the guys that missed the season, of course. I got to think, we're talking 10 or 15 starts typically are lost along an offensive line that stays relatively healthy. So what's the comfort level of the 6th, the 7th, the 8th guys against a good opponent?
I think they're comfortable with their depth, and you're asking that, and I've got that information somewhere because I don't know if it's on a spreadsheet or in a notebook, because I went through this summer and was looking at the number of starters lost to compare, because everybody said last year more starters were lost, more starter games were lost than ever before. And so I went back and in recent past, yes, like you look back to 2014, 13, 15, when Ohio State was doing absolutely well, they didn't lose any starters in terms of the offensive line. Like same offensive lineman year after year. So there's a correlation there when, especially up front on the offensive line. There have been some years, and 2014 may have been one of them, where like the number of starters lost was minuscule, and boy, national championship. So, but you have to expect to lose some guys, and that's why they want 8 guys. They want a backup tackle, a backup guard, and a backup center, but they also have a swing guy like Tegra Shabola who can play guard or tackle. Josh Fryer could move to a guard if they're more comfortable with Fryer at guard and Shabola at tackle. So they've got some pieces they can move around. Of course, Vic Cutler could essentially play on any of the interior spots. And this is a guy who was a tackle last year. So they've got some depth that they like. They also have some versatility. And of course, Enoch Famahi may be the 6th man, and he's played everywhere, I think, except for center in terms of practicing as an Ohio State Buckeye. And you still have Matt Jones, who has snapped in practice as well. And so they've got the ability to move guys around. So I think they're comfortable with the depth, and they're comfortable with the versatility.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Tony had said there in terms of where they are with their 6th and 7th guy. I mean, ultimately, I think everybody would love to sit there and see 2 full lines. And I certainly remember a day and an age where Ohio State would roll out its second offensive line in like the second quarter of a game just to do it. And I don't think you necessarily need to be 10 deep. I mean, that would be great, but who is your 6, who is your 7, who is your 8? And are you able to cover all those positions? And not to reiterate everything that Tony said, do you have somebody that's capable of snapping the ball? Yes, you have Matt Jones. You certainly have Vic Cutler. Jacob James is in the mix. Who do you have that can sit there and play guard? I mean, obviously you have Enoch Famahi. What's your situation at tackle? Who do you have in terms of depth there? I mean, you got a young guy in Luke Montgomery. I mean, Zen Mahalski was certainly in the mix. Tegra Shabola. So I feel that with all of these names there, you are able to sit there and maybe check off 6, 7, and 8 and be like, okay, maybe it might not be as smooth as 1 through 5, but there certainly is a foundation to be able to go off of. And I mean, I only have to go back as far as 2020 when Ohio State played Michigan State and had a bunch of guys out with COVID. They were able to roll guys out there and played very well. So that's really the key, in my opinion.
Folks, we've got a interview premiering on the national channel here at the Voice of College Football Thursday at 6 o'clock Eastern Time with Senator Joe Manchin. We discussed an NIL proposal that he has with Tommy Tuberville. And so we have that interview. It premieres Thursday at 6 Eastern. So check that out. I know we've all been inundated with NIL. Don't want to think about it, but it is important, and it is an interesting proposal. All right. Steve started to talk defensive line, and there were a couple of comments made in the chat about our buddy Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, who has likened Jim Knowles to Don Brown, and he's served that up for me directly. And I said, I just believe that Jim Knowles is more advanced than Don Brown, and I just think that he understands the difference between the Big 12 and the Big 10. He understands he's in a different, more physical league. He also understands that he has an upgrade in talent and personnel. He also understands that he can't sit in the same defense regardless of what happens in any one game situation and just play the same defense against everyone over and over and over, whether that be an adjustment from game to game or an adjustment within game. But that was brought up a few times in the chat. But this is going to be one of the more, whether I was a Buckeyes fan or not, one of the more interesting storylines at the elite level in college football for me. Jim Knowles' defensive performance this year, I'm going to be fascinated by.
He's had 1 year. And everybody's ready to go nuts. Ohio State's defensive metrics were all better last year than the year before. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that Ohio State gave up too many big plays. Is a defense that is built around giving up 5 or 6 or 7 big plays necessarily what you need to have in this league? No, you've got to get that number down. We certainly saw some aggressive play calling that was probably too aggressive, that put Ohio State in bad positions. We certainly saw opportunities where Ohio State had to get opponents off the field only to have defenders fall down. So there is plenty of fault to be assigned around the table. But everything that Jim Knowles did at Oklahoma State, that was a multi-year process. I think that if you see Ohio State build upon what it had last year, limit the big hits, and maybe just stay on your feet, I think things are going to be significantly better. I think it just makes Michigan enthusiasts feel better. One of us, to sit there and label Jim Knowles as Don Brown, who inexplicably took Michigan backward, not forward. I think Jim Knowles is taking Ohio State forward in terms of what the numbers are, but yes, we could scratch off some of, Rutgers and some of these other things. It's what happens against Notre Dame. It's what happens against Michigan. It's what happens in the postseason that people are going to be focused on. But I just think it's a lazy comparison to make. And really, I understand that it's just a matter of trying to needle Ohio State people.
I think one thing to keep in mind when we talked to Jim Knowles on Monday, he talked about self-reflection and understanding that you don't need to be as aggressive as they were last year. And he's talked about introducing more coverages that keep things in front of the Ohio State defense. And I mentioned this on the Buckeye Weekly podcast yesterday or whenever, sometime this week. I don't recall us hearing him say anything about baking in this year any 5 big plays. There's been no talk about 5 big plays is understood. It's going to happen. We'll work with that. And you've heard more about just stopping big plays and not being okay with a certain number. So there's been a streamlining of what is acceptable, what is allowable, and really, I think I wrote about this the other day. Jim Knowles doesn't need to coach like he's still at Oklahoma State, just like Don Brown didn't need to coach like he was still at Boston College or whatever. You don't need to create as much chaos through scheme. You can allow your players, your defensive line to do that for you. And I think Jim Knowles will do that and not put the defensive backs in such a dangerous position this season. At least that's what he's saying.
Bizzer's chiming in with a little super chat contribution here. Let's see if I can wade through that. I may need some help. Here we go. Bizzer says, Dem boys said Buckeyes wasn't fine a win but they did. Michigan be cheating. Hey, can't come up with that one. Off if we keep it a buck. Buckeyes taking it all this year. Yes, of course, this year. Sorry, I'm not hip enough to have caught that the first time. Yes, on God. So Bizzer's confident. That's what I get out of that.
I think Bizzer's having a seizure.
But I'm going to go with Bizzer's confident.
I'm sorry.
It does raise an interesting question. Would Michigan have won these last 2 years against Ohio State if Jim Harbaugh wasn't breaking all kinds of NCAA rules that have gotten him now suspended? Is that been the secret to Michigan's success? The cheating, the constant blatant cheating in the face of the NCAA with nobody at Michigan taking responsibility until they're forced to. I think, is that what we're talking about? I think that's probably cheaters. Perhaps it has been confirmed by Ward Manuel himself for imposing a 3-game suspension on Jim Harbaugh. Also, regarding this suspension, so Michigan goes to the NCAA and says they agree like a 4-game suspension, and then the NCAA is like, actually, we don't agree to that. So then Michigan's like, okay, let's just go back to the drawing table. Let's think what can we propose that will make the NCAA happy. They didn't like the 4-game suspension, so now here's our new. They're going to slide the piece of paper over on the table. They've written a number down. It's like, I think you'll like this number that we've written down. They slide it over on the table. The NCAA takes a look at it, and it's 3 games. The negotiation is going the wrong way. If the NCAA says no, then Michigan's like, okay. I'll scribble that number out, put another number down, slide it over, and now it's 2 games. This is not the math that the NCAA is looking for.
That's how it works on Pawn Stars. I mean, if you sit there and you go up and you're negotiating with Chumley, I mean, you need to, that's just kind of how it works. And apparently the NC2A is Chumley.
Yeah. Memo to whoever's doing the Big Ten schedule next year, don't front load any Big Ten games for Michigan because he's going to need another 3 games off probably to start the if he's still there, to start the 2024 season, because somebody made the note that they're turning their roster over after this season, and will he even want to stick around? So guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's the first 3 games this year, and it'll be the last 3 games the following year or something like that. I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I don't want to say appalling because it doesn't. I don't really care that much to be quite honest. But it's baffling how they think that 3 is greater than 4. I just don't understand.
Yes, they were saying. Yes, it's unacceptable. The 4. You're right. We did that. That is a little too harsh. Here's the thing. Yes.
We offered too many games, and the NCAA is like, no. We couldn't possibly. That gets back to the Pawn Stars thing where somebody takes something in. Here's this katana blade. I'll take $50 for it. And they're like, well, actually, this is from like 1,700. We'll give you 1,000. That's kind of what Michigan is doing, or whatever. But the second game of the season for Michigan next year is Texas. So,
that's a toughie.
They don't want none of that SEC smoke.
Yeah.
Assuming it doesn't get canceled.
And just to be clear, I'm about 98% sure on this. When Urban Meyer was suspended in 2018, he was out of the football operation for 3 weeks, correct? As opposed to coaching the team all week and then having to get lost on Saturday.
Yeah, he wasn't even going to the facility, was he?
Yeah.
Corey Dennis was having to go home and explain it to him every day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to Harbaugh, I don't know what this restriction is going to be like, just during game time or all of Saturday, last communication with the team on Friday night, and then pick it up on Sunday morning. I don't know. But
what's his thing? He likes, I heard one thing on Sirius, he likes to breed chickens or grow chickens in the chicken coop in his backyard. So he'll spend his Saturday afternoons in the shaded backyard by the chicken coop, throwing chicken feed to the chickens. That'll be what he'll be doing.
Very well could be. Terry, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate it. No one is talking about Jaydan Ballard. Do you think he'll transfer?
Well, that's a tough question. He's probably not in the top 5. May not be in the top 6 because all accounts are Carnell Tate has come in and knocked everybody on their ear. And I think that he's become a pretty consistent threat. And Ballard and Fleming in particular are going to have to play well to maintain their spots. And, the jury is out, early in this season. Harrison and Buka, we know what they can do, but after that, spots 3, 4, 5, 6 are probably going to change on a week-to-week basis. Larry Johnson has always maintained that he starts the guys who play the best in practice. Could be the same premise with Brian Hartline. The guys who are best in practice each week will, maybe fill in 3, 4, 5, 6 in that order and have their number of plays, represent that. It sounded like Harrison is the split end, that Ibuka is the slot, whoever is the flanker, Fleming or Johnson. Sounds like Johnson can play all 3 positions, it sounds like. And then from there, how do Ballard and Tate and Ennis and Rogers, that to me seems like your top 9. Then you're down to Grays and Kojo Antwi, maybe. Is that it? Did I just name all 10 or 11 of them? So it's quite a crowded house you've got there, Mr. Hartline. How are you going to keep them all happy?
I'll just jump in. Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a good problem to have. These are first world problems, and I understand everybody wants to see everybody who made a commitment to Ohio State to go out there and have success. But there's only one ball, and you can only have 11 players at one time, unless it's an Ohio State special teams play where you might have 12 or more. I mean, special teams coordinator or not. But with that being said, opportunity is only going to knock once, and you've got to be ready to answer the door and answer the call at that point. And I would love to see Jaydan Ballard, his time and determination pay off, and for him to have that opportunity there. But I think you throw Xavier Johnson into the equation, and I think all the simple math that was there gets kind of skewed a little bit, because I think people at one point were like, well, what's Xavier Johnson going to do? How is he going to sit there and disrupt playing time? Well, dude ends up with the Block O jersey, has a touchdown against Notre Dame last year, has a touchdown against UGA last year. It's tough sledding. And, guys like Brandon Ennis and Carnell Tate are, and even Rogers are all performing very well in camp and now here into game preparation. So if you're not able to go when they sit there and they call for you to hit the field, it's obviously a problem.
If Jaydan Ballard has one catch this year, he'll have the same number of catches after 3 years that Terry McLaurin did, and he'll be 2 or 3 shy of the number of catches that Paris Campbell had after his first 3 years. Right now, he's already ahead of the pace that those two were at after 2 years. He's got one catch as a redshirt as a true freshman, 9 catches last year as a redshirt freshman. Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin didn't have a catch until their 3rd year at Ohio State. So he's already ahead of that schedule. Now, I don't see him transferring anywhere this year because there's nowhere to go other than to the transfer portal. He's already redshirted, so it's not like one of those things where he doesn't want to play more than 4 games to save a year. So he's going to play. I don't know how much he's going to play. What I will say is Ohio State's probably losing 4 receivers to the NFL draft next year. So that depth that Steve was talking about, the 10 or 11 guys, that's going to drop down, and there's going to be a need for leaders. And so a 4th-year guy would be great to have back, but it's up to him to show that he belongs, honestly. And we can start talking about Carnell Tate, because what Marvin Harrison said about him yesterday made everybody's jaw pretty much drop when he said that right now Carnell Tate is ahead of where Marvin Harrison was at this point last year, heading into his sophomore season, which right away it was like, you mean your freshman season? Like, no, I mean last year. So that is some crazy, just a crazy thing to think about. And I just wrote about it this morning. Like, yes, Marvin Harrison said that, but let's still give Carnell Tate some time to show what he is, and don't. He's got a ton of expectations on him before Marvin Harrison said anything about him, and now when he says that about him, it's like, yes, it makes you take note, but it's also a loaded wide receiver room, and based on Carnell Tate and the positions he's going to play, you've got 3-4 seniors, 2 seniors and 2 juniors that are going to be on the field a lot. So trying to find room for a Ballard, a Carnell Tate, Bryson Rogers, Noah Rogers, Brandon Ennis, it's going to be difficult, but I think we saw in the past couple of years, they need to rotate some more guys. And so the depth at this point should be to the point where there isn't as much of a drop off, even though you have 2 top 10 picks at receiver in Ibuka and Harrison. But you got to think about November, December, January in terms of their effectiveness. And Ibuka kind of broke down a little bit over the course of the season, and he was playing with some injuries. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to get some rotation going in my opinion.
I apologize to all the Big Ten rival fans that I offended when I ranked the wide receivers in the Big Ten, and I said Ohio State had the 3 best wide receivers in the Big Ten. It's actually the 4 best wide receivers in the Big Ten. I made a grave error there. We'll move Julian Fleming possibly down to 4, and Carnell Tate could be the best wide receiver, not in the Big Ten outside of Columbus.
Open it up to a draft and see what happens. And who are you taking ahead of those guys? Roman Wilson? I don't think so. Cornelius Johnson? No. Especially if you're getting a senior Cornelius Johnson versus a freshman Carnell Tate. Like nobody's making that pick.
No.
Is this a keeper league?
Yes, Kevin. Well, what's your NIL situation?
Good points about Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin. I did not expect either one of those guys to have the impact in the league that they have. Paris Campbell was a 2nd-round pick,
Mm-hmm.
and McLaurin's just racking up 1,000-yard seasons in the NFL with 75, 80 catches. It's both.
And I believe Terry McLaurin has his final year at Ohio State, 2018. He had, I think, let me see here, 35 catches. And so he finished with about 75 catches in his career at Ohio State, which is pretty amazing. And, most of that was over the final 2 seasons.
GOJ, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate that. GOJ, with nothing to say in particular, just wants to support the show. Thank you so much for that. We come your way each and every Wednesday, folks, 11 a.m. Eastern time. That is the typical time slot, but you see 4 of us, 4 different schedules, and I'll blame these 3 most of the time. But I kind of need them, or otherwise we'll be talking about Ohio State like circa 1995 if I did the show every week. So here we are, and sometimes we've got to move the schedule. Therefore, you subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications. Kevin, if we can size you up on a couple of recruits that Mika in particular, friend of the show, Mika, good to see you, wants to hear about. And of course, Steve and Tony chime in on Dominik McKinley, a top 10 defensive lineman out of Louisiana. Texas is a crystal ball, at least by 247 Sports.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a buddy of mine in Louisiana who said he didn't think that McKinley was going to end up at LSU, and said that he would seem to be pretty open. I think Texas may be the move there. I know Ohio State certainly wants to kind of still fill out its ranks a little bit on the defensive line, but there's some other names out there. Right now, I would take the field over Ohio State, but that's a name that I'm going to have to kind of circle back on, just as the board is always constantly changing and evolving. But at this point, I don't necessarily see McKinley in the plans.
I'm so disappointed in Kevin.
Ernest Willor, defensive lineman out of what has been a prosperous state for Ohio State, Maryland, is a top 15 defensive lineman.
Yeah, that's another one where I don't necessarily see Ohio State being any sort of favorite. I mean, that's one where I think that your usual suspects that are in the DMV area regularly, which is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, your Penn States and your Marylands, maybe even Rutgers and VTech being involved in that one. Again, get to the fall, see what might happen with some visits and things of that nature. But as of this point, no, I don't see him being really in the mix.
All right, folks. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We do this each and every Wednesday. Our next show is, I know, thumbs down. I'm hosting today Michigan at 5 Eastern, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. We're doing our conference by conference predictions this week. The Big Ten's coming up on Friday night. We've got the Big 12 tonight, but the Big Ten on Friday night. And I got to admit, I've not made my selection between Maryland and a resurgence by Michigan State and Mel Tucker to win the Big Ten Eastern Division. not made that choice yet.
Mark, I'll just let you know, I placed like a $1 parlay with some long shots for conference champs, and I took Texas Tech. How are you feeling?
Oh, I like that. Yes. For a $1 shot. Yes. That's a great selection. Tyler Shuck, Texas Tech.
He's
Joey
like,
McGuire doing
they're
a
like
nice job
9-0. They're like 9-0 when he finishes a game or something like that.
Yes.
So
I know it was
I
undefeated.
can tell you two teams that ain't going to be, and that's Texas and Oklahoma. Dead ball, false start on the offense, 5-yard penalty, still third down. Well, Texas now facing 3rd and 17. The Red Raiders going to get the ball back in good field position.
they're going to get so many sideline warnings. The entire team is just going to be pushed up against the stands.
Yeah. I mean, you could call holding on every play, and it holds water. I mean, there's no replay on that. Holding on the offense. That's Texas's 14th touchdown called back this season by holding. That's got to be a Big 12 record.
The only games where they didn't have any penalties called were in the Red River Shootout.
Yes, they're gonna play a
free for all
spot-free game that day.
Yeah.
Spot free.
They're gonna be like 3 fights, no penalties. It's all good.
I have not followed up on this stat and will not, but I heard by a few different sources that last year Texas and Oklahoma had only one holding call against their opponents the entire season in the Big 12.
Well, that'll tell you everything you need to know right there. So, yeah, we ain't looking for that. The game that really stands out to me, this goes back, was the West Virginia-Pittsburgh game 1,000 years ago, back like 2007, where all West Virginia had to do was win the game by a point, and they were going to the national championship game, and they kept throwing flag after flag after flag on Pittsburgh and moving the ball closer and closer and closer to the goal line for West Virginia. And the Big East officials were complicit. West Virginia wasn't, they couldn't win the game. I mean, it was like the Hollywood Squares. I'm sorry, you're going to have to earn that yourself. And they never did. And so no national championship for you.
Yes, Fox was weighing the TV ratings, West Virginia, LSU.
I don't think so. Yeah. That poor Dave Wannstedt. He got out of there with the win, though.
Yeah, who knows what would have happened in college football past that if West Virginia would have advanced with Rich Rod and
well, Ohio State beats West Virginia by 2 touchdowns, and that's that.
Well, I understand
and
that
Dressel's
part
still
of it.
the coach.
The West Virginia fans wouldn't say that, but
in his 23rd season as head coach is Jim Tressel.
But Rich Rod went to Michigan, of course.
Yeah.
What
you,
a time
sir,
to be
may have
alive.
been born that great moment at the county airport in Morgantown. The guy threw the chain link fence. You may have been born in the state of West Virginia, sir, but you are no mountaineer. Says that to him as he's getting on the plane to go to Ann Arbor.
David Greenshield tells me I have to give up my autographed Art Schleitzer jersey if I pick Michigan to win the Big Ten. I got to say, all the check boxes just go on that side in terms of stability and the games there and the easier schedule. And I got to say, man,
Just pick Penn State.
just pick Penn State.
Compromise pick, Penn State.
I did pick
Because
up.
Penn State is going to beat Michigan. So
All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Tony Gerdeman next to me, Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weekly. What's going on over there this week?
I just dropped an episode on Tuesday about what we heard from Ryan Day and Jim Knowles and the change in defense and quarterback situation and things like that. As I said, I wrote today about give Carnell Tate some time, be patient with him, please. So you can find that and several other things on BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Kevin, what's working this week for you?
Yeah, just starting to get into my game week rotation. We'll start working on tail of the tape, start working on behind enemy lines, getting ready for focusing on the Indiana Hoosiers, just kind of getting some ideas put together for maybe some recruiting pieces as well. And we'll probably do a Big Me kickoff on Friday, a live edition of it. But you got to make sure that you're subscribed to our channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle to know when we're going to do that, because generally I only have to adjust the schedule of one person, myself, but I haven't made any decisions yet on when I may go live.
Steve, what are you working on this week?
Well, I think we're done with all the interviews for this week. We had Heartline and the wide receivers and the special teams guys last night. So no more interviews. So a lot of, catching up, I guess, this next few days. Coach Day's first big interview session will be on Tuesday of next week with his weekly media get-together, previewing the Indiana game, and we'll just go from there. So a lot of odds and ends. I'm going to do picks for this weekend's small slate of 7 games, I think, that involve FBS teams. To me, I said this yesterday, it's interesting. ABC has a historically black college game in prime time on ABC Saturday night, and ESPN has New Mexico State and Massachusetts in prime time on Saturday night. But you have to go to Pac-12 Network that nobody has to find the USC game, which a year from now that game would be played on Big Ten Network 6. So, San Jose State at USC, 8 o'clock Saturday night, Pac-12 Network. One thing that, hasn't, there's a lot going on with this conference expansion, 18 teams. How are you going to separate a 14 tie at 8-1 when 3 of the teams didn't play each other? That's going to be interesting. And then I think they be within their rights to have a Big Ten Network 2 at this point and have live sports going on 2 channels at the same time. They already get an overflow channel or 2 on Saturdays when they've got multiple games at noon. They allow them to have an overflow channel, at least on my Spectrum they do, and I assume on DirecTV they do. And it's only manned, theoretically a board operator, plugs that one in just for that 4-hour period where there's a game, 2 games on BTN at once. I think it could go 24/7 with the BTN 2. And I know they want to drive a lot of it to digital, but I mean, you've got enough content now, at least during football, during the first 2 seasons, really for 9 months out of the year, you've got enough content to run live sports on 2 networks now with 18 schools. So I don't know why that isn't something that they don't pursue.
I don't believe I'm going to get my wish when I tune into New Mexico State and UMass on Saturday night, ESPN primetime, and find Fowler and Herb Street doing the game with my Crucis.
Well, that's a Rod Gilmore and whoever. Used to be Tessitore and Gilmore got those games. Tessitore and Gilmore, but Tessitore.
Hey, those guys are making a lot of money. They need to. It's primetime ESPN. Send them out there. Let's do it. All right, guys. Appreciate you being here. Buckeyes Live. Keep us subscribed and notified throughout the week to know when we're going live. See you guys.